The Fox Theater will celebrate its 56th birthday on Christmas Day of this year, and we are all very fortunate to be able to participate in that happy day, thanks in large part to the concerted efforts of a lot of people whose time and work and money saved this landmark from the wrecker's ball, a wrecking ball that had already wreaked havoc with a lot of Atlanta's grand movie palaces, the Paramount, the Roxy, Lowe's Grand, all just memories, but how sweet they are.
They were big, they were flashy, they were magnificent. The downtown movie palaces that once provided an entertainment mecca for Atlantans were every bit as lavish, every bit as fantastic as the big-budget Hollywood pictures that flickered across their giant screens.
In these days of small multi-screen shopping mall cinemas, it may be hard for some of you younger viewers to imagine or even believe that once upon a time there were more than a dozen big theaters right here in downtown Atlanta.
There were the Cameo and the Criterion, smaller houses that occupied part of the block that's now Woodruff Memorial Park. The Metropolitan stood nearby at the corner of Broad and Peachtree Streets. Just up Peachtree stood two giants side by side. The Howard Theater was designed by noted Atlanta architect Neil Reed. When it opened in the early 20s, it was, like the headline said, the South's most palatial theater. Frequent patrons were treated to a free subscription to the Howard Close-Up, a weekly newsletter detailing the behind-the-scenes wonders of the Howard, along with features on upcoming attractions. The Howard later became the Paramount. These were the days of movie exclusivity. You either saw a picture at the Paramount or you didn't see it at all. At least that's what they wanted you to think. The Paramount was known as the brightest spot in town. Maybe. But the Paramount could only sit in the glow of the brightest spot in town on that night in 1939, when her next-door neighbor, the Lowe's Grand, hosted the fabulous world premiere of Gone with the Wind, the most glamorous evening in Atlanta movie history. The Grand was originally DeGeeves Grand Opera House, built in 1896. In the 30s, it was remodeled in the sophisticated Art Deco style of Radio City Music Hall. Like most big theaters of the era, the Grand maintained an army of fresh-faced, flashlight-equipped ushers who personally escorted happy patrons to their seats.
The original Rialto was built on the corner of Forsyth and Lucky Street in 1916.
Atlantans of the day were thrilled by the dazzling sign over the marquee, the largest electric sign south of New York. The Rialto that stands there now was constructed in 1962. It is the only movie house left in the downtown business district. Near the concrete monuments of Peachtree Center, you can still see a narrow strip of marble floor peeking out from underneath one of Davison's display windows. This marks what was the entrance to the Capitol Theatre, which featured motion pictures, vaudeville acts, and a real innovation for its day, air conditioning. Next door to the Capitol stood another of Atlanta's giants. Keith's Georgia opened in 1926, was darkened by the Depression, and reopened after a $70,000 refurbishing as the Roxy in 1938. The Roxy featured movies, vaudeville acts, even headliners like the Andrews Sisters, who belted out Beat Me Daddy 8 to the bar in 1940.
When he plays with the bass and guitar, that Beat Me Daddy 8 to the bar.
The Roxy later offered the first Cinerama picture in the Southeast. From these photographs, taken just 2 days before the Roxy's demolition in 1972, it is easy to see why it was often described as one of the most beautiful theaters in the world.
Ironically enough, the Roxy was torn down to make way for the Peachtree Plaza Hotel, a hotel designed by a former Roxy usher named John Portman.
Sadly, these theaters are gone now. The Paramount fell to the wrecking ball in 1960 to make way for an insurance company building, which in its turn fell when Georgia Pacific acquired the entire block for their new headquarters. And fire struck the Lowe's Grand building in 1978. Of course, the theater's fate had already been sealed by the same Georgia Pacific deal. Fortunately, there are two big picture palaces still with us. The Erlanger Opera House was built in the mid-20s. Later, its name changed to the Tower, then the Cinerama, after a remodeling equipped it to show the widest screen epics of the 60s. Now it is the Columbia Theater, showing first-run features on its enormous screen. The 80-foot picture sheet at the Columbia is the biggest in town and among the biggest in the country. Sig Schwartz, a former executive with MGM Theaters, came to Atlanta to open the Columbia for Andre Peterze in 1982.
On several occasions, reviewers have said that you haven't seen a film unless you've seen it at the Columbia Theater. And this was true when we played Raiders of the Lost Ark, when we played E.T. They said, you haven't seen it. We got a lot of repeat business. A great deal of our business is repeat business. After they see the film in another shopping center theater, they come here.
We can thank some old-time Atlanta Shriners for the Fox Theater. It was their idea to create a new temple and meeting place that would out-Baghdad Baghdad. They included a theater in their plans to help finance the $3 million showplays. The Fox opened on Christmas night of 1929. Among the opening night's entertainments were Steamboat Willie, starring an animated mouse named Mickey. The feature was Salute, a picture by director John Ford that featured a handsome young actor named John Wayne. The Fox was a fine example of an atmospheric theater, one designed to make you feel as though you're outdoors or in some exotic locale. In the Fox, you're surrounded by Moorish spires and minarets, while stars twinkle and desert clouds waft across the midnight blue sky. The Fox boasts one of the largest theater organs in the country. The mighty Moeller's console measures 9 feet across, and its pipes fill 5 rooms on either side of the mammoth stage. In spite of its enormity and grandeur, the Fox has often faced hard financial times. First, the Depression, then the combined effects of television and suburban flight made the Fox a white elephant. In January of 1975, the Fox ran her last regular feature, a forgettable film called The Klansman. But the Fox was eventually saved. Not so a number of smaller neighborhood theaters. The 10th Street Theater at 10th and Peachtree is gone almost without a trace. Its place is pavement. The Temple Theater on Cherokee Avenue in Grant Park was part of a Masonic temple building. It's now a workshop. The Little Five Points Theater is now the Dancers Collective. But all are not lost. The Buckhead Cinema and Draft House began life in the 30s as the Capri Theatre, the first movie house in town built specifically to show sound movies. Another picture show from the 30s, the Plaza at Ponce de Leon and Highland, was cleaned up and reopened recently by Atlanta theater mogul George LaFont. One old theater that has happily been revived is in Little Five Points. The Euclid Theater opened in 1940, closed in 1962, and reopened last year as the Ellis Theater, named for George. The Ellis is a specialty house featuring offbeat and foreign films on the city's 3rd largest screen and is run by theater buffs Glenn and Jill Circus.
It's hard to explain. At a night when there's a crowd full of people in there laughing and responding to the movie, it must be similar to the kind of feeling that actors and actresses feel when they're on stage. Even though you're off in the wings, it's still, your show, and you feel good about, entertaining people and having them come to see what you're presenting.
Many of the big theaters rested on land that tempted the vision of developers. Their lobbies were reduced to gilded rubble, and their appointments found their way into the expensive resting places of relics. Obsolescent leviathans, they rose in the giddy optimism of the 20s and fell in the sensible 50s and 60s. But they had a greatness, if only in their wondrous excesses, the opportunities they gave designers to compound everything into huge, emblazoned, over-decorated pleasure domes, decreed by Cons with names like Lowe, Fox, and Grauman. And in those shrines, millions of the movie's postulants sat enchanted before glowing portraits, evanescent images of Keaton, Chaplin, Gable, Harlow, Wayne, Davis, Bogart. In the play The Fantastics, the old actor begs his audience, "Remember me in light." Let us so remember those kings and queens of the screen and the palaces they reigned in.